Today we're going to be taking a look at the 1952 Topps Look and See set. So let's get started. Now the set features 135 cards. It was distributed in two different series. The first one was a series of 75 cards. The second one was 60. Generally, from what I've seen online, the first series is easier to find in comparison to the second series. And essentially how Topps created the set, they broke it up into different sections, but they weren't super consistent with them. For example, we have presidents 1 through 9, but FDR is card number 1. Not sure the reasoning behind that one. Then you have famous Americans 10 through 31, military leaders 32 to 42, and then famous women 43 through 46. There's other sections in here as well throughout series 2 and different things like that, but yeah, it's not super consistent. And when I was thinking of this video, I'm like, what do I compare this to? Because it's interesting. It's like one of Topps's first bigger non-sports releases. They did have a few non-sports before Look and See. But this is their iconic year. Honestly, I'm going to kind of lump together this as like a 50s through 70s baseball set. Now, the reasoning behind this is the Babe Ruth kind of acts as like the Mickey Mantle. In all your 50s and 60s baseball sets, the mantle always goes for such a premium, right? And same with Ruth. So you have that comparison on there. And also, once you hit a certain threshold, all the registry collectors go after cards. And typically when you're looking at like 50s through 70s baseball, usually a threshold becomes like a PSA 8 or a 9. Prices start to get a little crazy. Well, with the Look and See, it really depends on the card, but once you get to 7s most of the times and 8s, the prices just really take off. So I thought about it and I'm like, well, it's kind of like a standard Topps release in general. There are some short prints or single prints. I know some people call SPs short prints, some call them single prints. I just labeled them as short prints in this video, but regardless, there are some tougher ones to find. I think that's either the next slide or the slide after we go over those. It'll be the next slide after this. But a little bit more information for you guys. I was researching a lot of articles, which I try to do for these videos, right? I try to research some articles. I try to ask some people. So apparently these packs were distributed or sold, I should say, between 1952 through 56. Now, on the later years, I don't know, maybe it was like leftover stock from stores that just never sold, and that's why it was sold all the way through 1956, or just Topps kept distributing them all the way through 56. But regardless, they were sold both also in the United States and Canada. Besides the packaging differences, which you'll see the image to the bottom right, I don't see any designations of the cards, whether they're Canadian or within the United States. That is kind of interesting to me because if you look at other O-Pee-Chee cards, they're clearly labeled on them, but I haven't seen anything with Look and Sees. I asked in the Facebook group, but no one knew or hasn't gotten back to me yet. So if you do know, let me know because I'm kind of curious on that. The thought process behind the set is it was printed between February and November of 1952. That's because of Queen Elizabeth grabbing her title as queen, and then also President Eisenhower. They had two of the candidates, the Republican and the Democrat, in this set for the 1952 election, but they didn't claim either of them were president yet. And because of that, that's why the thought process is it's between February and November when these were printed, or at least they were designed and ready to go. Now, I mentioned the last one, but there is a big premium in PSA 7 plus grades, especially compared to like 4s, 5s, 6s. I mean, you'll see a huge jump, and that's because of registry collectors. And you'll see the biggest jumps in the short printed cards, especially those 8s. You're talking about cards that start going for like $1,000 plus. It's crazy high, but people always want to fight over who has the best set. Now, I got a lot of this information about these packs and the distribution from this article on oldbaseball.com. So I will give them a shout out on that side of things. And I highly recommend it. It was like 15 pages just talking all about 1952 Look and See. Way too much information to kind of throw in a presentation like this. So one thing to also mention is there's a lot of disagreements online of what the short prints or single prints or triple prints are in the set currently. And this could have been changed since I read the article. This is what the assumption is the ones on the left are going to be the single prints, and the ones on the right are going to be the triple prints. You can find them a lot more often. Now, a few things with this as well. There are some triple prints that are still expensive cards. Edgar Allan Poe is very expensive. Michelangelo, still a decently expensive card. But all those single prints or short prints here on the left, they're either in the honorable mentions in this video or they have dedicated slides because they get very expensive. And again, this is just the rumored single prints or triple prints. There didn't look to be any that were in Series 1. It only impacted Series 2. And the reason why it's rumored is there has been no uncut sheets that have been discovered or posted online. So people just don't know how these have been printed. I'm not sure why there hasn't been any uncut sheets, because typically a lot of the top sets uncut sheets have been discovered over the years. Somehow Look and See has escaped that. So I also want to talk about a set that looks very similar. You can even see the Look and See name. And, you know, if you go back a few slides, right, that almost looks like the same back. And essentially, there's a place in the United Kingdom called Collinville. They created a Look and See set in 1959. So apparently they copied the bios on the back, the same exact design. I could not find a picture of the front of these cards. I looked at a lot of resources. I saw a pack online, but I could not find the front. So I'm curious if it's the exact same thing. I did see other Collinville cards from 1959 that were not the Look and See set online. There's, I think, some space cards, and those were even labeled in trading card database, but these weren't. Extremely rare, I would assume, and especially reading. And again, I discovered this through this article in Old Baseball, but it's interesting. And obviously those numbers don't line up because like number 19 isn't Henry Ford, number 8 isn't Jesse James. So they built their own checklist based around the Look and See characters, but I just thought it was interesting. I had to share it with you guys on that side of things. So full set pricing, commons, you can find commons at a lot of card shows, surprisingly enough. Usually I see them between $5 and $10. It really depends on the condition on those. Some of the raw bigger names, like especially some of the presidents and famous Indians and historical figures, they could go anywhere from like $30 to $50. I'd say closer to $30 though. Again, it all really depends on shape, right? Especially like you can find 3s, 4s, 5s in that price range most of the time. Some really escalate quite a bit. An approximately low grade set value, I'd estimate anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000. But again, it depends on how nice a few cards are in the set because they can balloon really fast. So let's take a look at a few sets that have sold. So this is a 1952 Look and See set that was sold on the recent vintage non-sports auction, 6/30/2024. This set sold for $2,264. But looking down here, it said the Ruth card is near mint condition, but slightly off-centered, and the Rembrandt is very good X. I mean, that Ruth being near mint alone, and there's no picture over here to the side, so I do apologize. But I mean, if it's a decent grade, that could be $1,000 plus. So that definitely has an impact on the pricing on that side. And if there's a lot of cards that are X to X-Men, if there's any that look close to a 7, it could really impact that as well. From far away, the Lincoln looks pretty nice. And so same with some of those early presidents, which are very collectible. I guess we could see the Ruth a little bit on that second picture, just the top of it, but not the full card. All right, and then I saw another one also. This was sold at Heritage Auctions in December. The quality of this set is a lot worse than that first set, and this one sold for $1,000. So going back over here, $1,000 to $2,000, I think that's an appropriate price range for a set. Again, a non-graded set, but just stuff that you find raw. All right, pop report wise, you're looking at about 23,614 for the total pop, where the average card is about 175 graded. There are 10 PSA 10s, and there's 9 of those. And the highest graded on SGC side of things is a 9, and there's 17. Really, there is a ton of raw still out there, including the Babe Ruth. I didn't even want to estimate it because I'm sure there's a ton of collectors that still have these. There's a lot at card shows. So unlike some of the other non-sports videos where I kind of make an estimation, it's really tough to say. I mean, especially because of the grading population of the Ruth compared to other cards in the set. There's so many Ruths that are graded. So there's just so many that are still out there. And all-time finest sets, you can see GPA weighted. The highest out here is Grand Slam 8.89. Even through number 5, you have an 8.46. And lastly, before we jump into individual cards, if you guys want to join the non-sports Facebook group that I started with a few other members, we just hit 1.2k members, and it's only been 2 months. So make sure to join that. I'll try to put the link down below in the description and the comment section. So if you want to join, sell some cards, network with other vintage and non-sports collectors. Okay, starting off, we have FDR. First card in the set, it was the multi-term president, 193 graded. PSA 9 is the highest out there. And clear example of the bias of the 7 grade. 7 sold for 306. An SJC 5 is sold for $26. I mean, that's a huge gap for those prices. Up next, Abraham Lincoln. It doesn't really follow this pattern as much because you have a lot more people collecting Lincoln cards. 7 sells for $250, whereas 6 sells for $175. 223 graded, with the highest being a PSA 9. Teddy Roosevelt, another interesting one. There definitely is a big gap into a 7, but I think also this person who purchased the most recent 7 paid up pretty well because 8s were selling for about 300-ish, if I remember correctly, and 135 graded, with the highest being a PSA 9. George Washington, SGC PSA Pop 290, highest graded out there is a PSA 9. 6 sells for about $200, whereas 8 sells for $564. The most expensive card in the set, and also the only baseball player, Babe Ruth, number 15, a PSA 8 recently sold for $3,300, whereas a PSA 6 sold for $738. Man, that is such a high pop on that Ruth card, which makes me think there's just so many of these other cards out there that just have not been graded yet. Albert Einstein, famous scientist, almost made the honorable mentions, but 237 total graded. 9 just sold for almost $3,000, where 7 is about $125. I tried filtering on the 7s with this. There's probably a few I missed, but if anything over 7 was like about $140, $150 plus, they were in this video. Otherwise, I tried putting stuff around $100 into honorable mentions. So Einstein just barely made it because of being a big name and also that huge PSA 9 sale. Amelia Earhart, known as a famous flyer that went missing, 232 graded. The last 8 sold for $405, where the last 5 sold for $130. That 5 sale kind of surprised me. Christopher Columbus, another one that was kind of expensive in the set. I was kind of shocked about it. Also, interesting enough, this is his most expensive card, although he has stuff in the 1800s and early 1900s. 6 sold for $49, and PSA 8 sold for $335. 155 graded, with the highest out there being a PSA 9. Rembrandt, another one that this is his most expensive card, even though he has a lot rarer stuff in the 1800s and 1900s, including his Ogden Guinea Gold. When people think of short prints or single prints in the set, the Rembrandt is one of the top cards, especially like his 1.5 just sold for $60 and 8 sold for $1,800. Great comic placement by me, by the way, before checking this video. Highest is 9, but this is one of those cards that's just hard to find in high grade, and that's why there's such a premium on these. Queen Elizabeth, probably the second most popular card in the set, behind the Babe Ruth. She became the queen in 1952. SJC Pop about 322, and PSA 8 sold for 1980, where an SJC 5 sold for 350. I'd say Rembrandt is probably the third most popular card in the set. I talked about him being the most popular short print, but I'd give him number 3 all day long. Edgar Allan Poe, this is considered to be one of the triple prints, but there's 130 that are graded, which is kind of interesting because there's a lot of Edgar Allan Poe fans out there, and the cards are kind of expensive. 8 has sold for $780, but that is the highest grade. There's no 9s out there, so that's why there's such a premium on the 8 grade, and a 6 sold for $40. Julius Caesar, considered one of those short print numbers, 136 graded, which once again, right, the one article said Poe was a triple print. Caesar was a short print, but they're comparable pops. So I don't know if that theory is 100% correct or not, but highest graded on Caesar is an 8. A 7 sold for $659, and a 6 sold for $50. I mean, that's an insane price difference when you're jumping from a 6 to a 7. I mean, that's crazy. That's one grader's opinion. It's I'm kind of speechless on that one. Regardless, let's move on to the next one. This guy was also running for president in 1952, including the set as a single or short print. It'd be kind of interesting if he ended up winning, how expensive this card would be if it was technically a known single print or short print. Regardless, 123 graded. PSA 9 is the highest, and a 7 sold for $215, or an 8 sold for $299. Daniel Defoe. I should have done a little bit more research on what he was an author from. Usually I try to put stuff here and I missed it, but 115 graded, the highest is a 9. The 9 sold recently for $2,500. A 7 sold for $185, and I had to show you the PSA 5. Yeah, that sold for $13. So although this is a short print or single print, you really have to get the 7 plus for it to be worth it. Some stuff obviously we've talked about this video are worth grading in lower grades, but kind of these, I wouldn't call this guy unknown, but to the general public compared to like a George Washington or Lincoln, people don't know who Defoe is. I'm not familiar with him, to be honest with you, and I know a decent amount about history. John Rockefeller, another one of these short prints. Funny enough, his most expensive card. I have some Rockefeller stuff from the early 1900s, and they're so cheap. And in comparison to his look and see, a 6 sold for $77, a 7 sold for $405, 153 graded, PSA 9 being the highest. Joan of Arc was known as a French saint. I think when I was reading it was like 100-year war or something like that. Oops. 153 graded, a 6 sold for $42, but then you jump to an 8, it's $1,036 in the most recent sale. I did want to go through some honorable mentions because this set has a lot of famous names, and everyone in here, they sell really well, but just didn't sell enough price wise to have their own slides. So Thomas Jefferson and U.S. Grant were two of the other bigger presidents from the first, was it 9 cards that almost made it here. Then you have Ben Franklin, Charles Lindbergh, and Robert Lee. Then you have Geronimo and Sitting Bull on the Indian side of things. Billy the Kid, Amundsen, which is one of the short prints, probably mispronounced that. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and then you have Vespucci and Herbert, also two of the short prints. And then the last card in the set, Dolly Madison, which gets a little bit of a premium. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to at least put out one of these set videos every single week. It does take a little bit of work to do, so if you do enjoy this, make sure to do that and subscribe to the channel. And I always could use help on these videos, so if you are an expert in a set and you want to help out, hit me up, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or email. Right now, focusing on non-sports, but I will expand out to other sports in the future. And if you want to help with a channel membership as well, I give you a shout out at the very end of the video. So our channel members, Paul, Giles, Alaska Picker, and Aaron, I really appreciate it. All right, guys, well, that's it for this video. And if you want to watch other non-sports ones, they're on the channel. Otherwise, I will catch you in another video.